أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ها أنتم أولئك تحبونهم ولا يحبونكم وتؤمنون بالكتاب كله وإذا لقوكم قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا عضوا عليكم الأنامل من الغيظ قل موتوا بغيظكم إن الله عليم بذات الصدور إن تمسسكم حسنة تسؤهم وإن تصبكم سيئة يفرحوا بها وإن تصبروا وتتقوا لا يضركم كيدهم شيئا إن الله بما يعملون محيط. We have already read the translation of these verses, and partly I had finished the discussion on the first verse which I have recited today, that is 120th of Surah Aale-Imraan. Ha antum ulai tuhibbunahum wa la yuhibbunakum wa tu'minuna bil kitabi kullih wa idha laqukum qalu amanna wa idha khalaw addu alaykum al-anamila min al-ghayz قل موتوا بغيظكم إن الله عليم بذات الصدور. I promised yesterday that I will discuss the commentary of Veri on this particular verse and expose the hypocrisy and involved in his attack and also the viciousness of his attack. So I'll start reading from Veri. तुम भी कहाँ गए वो वेरी वाला हवाला आखिर पे होगा इसके. Is this the one? Right. His commenting on this verse, the Reverend Veri writes, the spirit of the Prophet's love is shown in the last clause of this verse, die in your wrath. The evident purpose of the exhortation here is to eradicate every vestige of natural affection for unbelieving friends and neighbors from the hearts of his followers. This is what he has inferred from this, or would have the world believe. The evident purpose of the exhortation here is to eradicate every vestige of natural affection for unbelieving friends and neighbors from the hearts of his followers. Nothing was too heartless or cruel for Muhammad ﷺ to counsel or perform, provided his interest or his revenge could thereby be satisfied. I have never had a more vicious attack and more unwarranted and totally without any foundation attack on Ahmad ﷺ before in my life. I mean, invectives is something else. To abuse call bad names is a way of giving expression, but in a apparently scholarly way, to attack as if it's a well-founded attack based on the facts of life. This is the most vicious attempt that has ever been made against the character of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nothing was too heartless or cruel for Muhammad to counsel or perform, provided his interest or his revenge could thereby be satisfied. To wit, the assassination of Asma, Abu Afaq and Ka'b ibn Ashraf, the exile of the Jewish tribes of Nadir and Tanqa, and the inhuman slaughter of 800 prisoners of the Bani Qurayza, and many other instances of similar nature. We believe in all the scriptures. Here he turns to the next part of the verse, where the Holy Quran says, "Tu'minuna bil kitabe kulle." He says, ye believe, not we, ye believe in all the scriptures. This is no doubt what Muhammad intended they should do, but in the sense of simply acknowledging them to be the word of God, and not in the sense that they should read them or hear them read. See note on verse 93. This is the practice of the Muslims still, showing how well they understand their Prophet. They profess to accept the Pentateuch, Psalms and Gospels as the word of God, but the moment these are produced and made to testify against Islam, they declare they have been corrupted. All arguments are set aside by the claim that whatever is in accord with Islam is true, and whatever is not in accord therewith is either false or, if true, abrogated. So he has in fact launched two attacks on this verse. Many attacks in fact included in these two attacks, but mainly they are that number one, Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam strongly admonished Muslims to not to have any human relationship based on the milk of human kindness concept with their opponents, whatever they are. And they must not show them any mercy, any quarter, any humanity, or any justice, of course, that is also meant, because they must be hated, and they must be hated with a vengeance. This is the spirit of his attack. And he says this is the inner spirit of Nauzubillah Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam. According to this attack, the companions were much kinder than Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They had decency, they had humanity, human values in them. But Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam had none of these. So, bearing for some time with them for a while, ultimately he just gave himself up and said, look here, this is what I am inside. This is what I want you to be within yourselves. So this is the viciousness of the attack. The words, of course, are very cruel, but we have to read them, we have to bear with them, because now I'll turn to the answer. The second part is about his understanding of the belief in the book. Already I have spoken at length on this subject yesterday, and in view of that explanation, that objection is no longer valid at all. Either he has genuinely failed to understand the expression "Tu'minuna bil kitabi kulle," or perhaps after reading him, I believe, he has intentionally misread that verse, while if he claims to be a scholar on Islam and he claims to have read the Holy Quran in depth, at length, how could he forget the other explanatory verses found so abundantly in the Holy Quran regarding the belief in the book, what sort of belief we have, and what its true meaning is. So that shows again this is a vicious attack with malintentions. There is no question of giving him the credit of good intention at all after reading what we have read. Now I'll turn to the treatment of the Jews, which he has referred to in short, and take these one by one. I have chosen, instead of going into the detail of individuals mentioned there as to why they were punished and what was the background, I have taken up for today the cases of the tribes, the Jewish tribes, which have been mentioned here, and will prove to you that the allegations are totally false, unwarranted, uncalled for, and unfounded. But the story begins with the covenant of Medina. When Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived in Medina, very shortly after that, a conference was held where the elders of various tribes and religions were invited to come to an understanding so that they could all live in peace and security from each other as well as from outsiders. So that was the purpose of that covenant. And in that covenant, all the parties, all factions of Medina, inhabitants of Medina, agreed without one exception that Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself will be the chief organizer of this covenant, implementer of this covenant, and in case of any disagreement, he will be the chief arbitrator, and all disputes will be referred to him. So this is the background of the covenant. Some of the relevant clauses I'm going to read to you because they apply to the cases which have been referred to by Mr. Wary. Number 6 reads, if any people attacked either Jews or Muslims, they will both support each other and join the battle on behalf of each other. So remember this. Again it says, if anyone attacked on Medina, whoever that party be, all the Medinites will join forces to defend Medina. Number 8, the Quraysh of Mecca will get no support whatsoever from the Jews, and they will never be given any sanctuary wherever the Jews hold power and were settled. So remember this, Quraysh of Mecca were accepted to be the common enemies by the Jews. There was no coercion involved in this covenant. This was a completely free covenant where none of the parties which signed the covenant had been coerced in any manner of speaking. So this was the product of a complete, total free will of all parties involved, and the Jews had signed this. They will never support the Quraysh of Mecca in any manner of speaking, and they would never be provided any shelter by the Jews. The 9 read, all the parties concerned will bear their own expenses during the expeditions or involvement in wars, etc. The 10th read, if anyone erred or broke the covenant in any manner of speaking, he would not be safe from due punishment and revenge against his treachery to this solemn covenant. In light of this, let's now turn to the Jewish history of Medina, where tribe after tribe broke the covenant, defied the covenant, and even when they were approached by Ahad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's emissaries, who tried to make them see the light of the day, to behave with common sense and to reform their ways, they refused. Not only refused, they behaved violently and reacted in a rebellious manner and challenged the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Muslims to do whatever they could do. They would not change their way. So this was how the story started. The first involved was the strongest of the tribe, known as Banu Qaynuqa. They were famous warriors, a very powerful tribe, and a very proud tribe for that matter too. This is the tribe which started first molesting the Muslim ladies in Medina, taunting them and misbehaving towards them. And the story is so vile that I can't go into the detail how they repeatedly insulted the Muslim ladies and also indulged in other anti-Islamic activities and openly defied the covenant they had signed only less than 2 years before the time when they were ultimately punished. At this, Ahad sallallahu alaihi wasallam invited all the chiefs of Medina, of the tribe, and addressed them himself and warned them against such activities and told them to reform and stop such hostile activities. Otherwise, Sallallahu who was the ultimate arbitrator, accepted arbitrator, will be left with no choice but to move against them. Tariq al-Khamis in the first volume, page 470 or whatever edition it is, it's not mentioned. But when this is published, before printing, the editions should also be included in all the references. Tabaqat Sa'd, Ibn Sa'd, in second volume, page 19, mentions this and speaks of the Jewish disrespect and defiance at whatever messages were sent to them by Ahad. Instead of reforming themselves, they went on increasing in their mischiefs and also in their defiance. Once, when they were sent, someone from Ahad approached them and told them to behave, the answer was that Prophet Muhammad, they mentioned him with scant respect and said, when you will come to blows with us, only then will you know who is stronger and who is capable of dictating terms. So off with you, do whatever you may. When Ahad heard this, he said it means that they have already decided on the path of war, and we have been left with no choice. So they were with due warnings, of course, not suddenly, They were attacked by the Muslim forces, and after a while they gave up, they surrendered, and shamelessly accepted the terms and referred the matter to Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, requesting him to permit them to leave Medina and go towards Syria without any molestation, with all the wealth they could carry. But after due negotiations, this was decided that they cannot take their property with them, but their lives will be spared. While according to one term of the covenant, such matters were to be decided according to the respective books of the people. So that is a very clear term in the covenant, which meant that if the Jews broke the covenant, they would be punished according to the law of Moses, not according to the law of the Quran or according to whatever Rasulullah so pleased. So the book of Moses on this subject was very clear. In हवाला अंग्रेजी का इसका एग्जैक्ट नहीं लिया हुआ आपने? अच्छा, इस्तिस्ना को डिट्रोनोमी कहते हैं ना? Istisna is Deuteronomy, isn't it? Huh? Anybody? Pardon? Istisna, which is written in Urdu, I don't remember exactly what it's called in English. Pardon? Exception? No. Except, there is no book by the name of exception. I'm talking of the term used in the Bible. I think it's Deuteronomy or whatever it is. Anyway, istisna, remember this. We'll put the right name later on. It says that according to this, chapter 20th, verses 12 to 14, whoever breaks a covenant will be completely slaughtered. No life will be spared. So it was the mercy of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, not his sense of vengeance, which gave quarters to the Jews. And despite the fact that their own book had forfeited their lives, Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam permitted them to live in peace and not completely without their baggage or without some necessary food, etc., which they naturally required on the way to Syria. So one of the leaders from among the Muslims who belonged to the tribe who was friendly with this tribe was specially appointed by Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to see to it that all arrangements are made to the advantage of this tribe and they are not put to any trouble whatsoever. So they left in peace with all the necessary minimum, of course, not the entire possessions, but necessary requirements were provided to them, and they left in peace. So this is one expression of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's so-called spirit of vengeance. Again, no Jewish tribe raised any objection against this decision. Nobody challenged this decision. They all accepted this in peace, with submission, knowing that it was they were treated more kindly than they deserved. So there is not a single objection on record in history raised by other tribes against the decision of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam regarding Banu Qaynuqa. Ubadah bin Samit was the leader who was friendly to this tribe, who was appointed by Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to look after their safe exodus. The second is the case of Banu Nadir. Their expulsion from Medina took place in the fourth year of Hijri. It was, according to some sources, Rabiul Awwal, the month the fourth year in the month of Rabiul Awwal. Now this tribe indulged, among other things, in conspiracies against Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with the Quraysh of Mecca, who by name had been mentioned in the covenant, and it was made very clear that they would have no relationship with them, no conspiracy with them against Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and they would be treated as common enemies. They would be given no shelter. So the leaders of this tribe, some of the leaders of this tribe, went to Mecca and exhorted them to attack Medina, and to also indulged in invectives, in poetry, in prose, and became more and more aggressive and insulting to Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself. After bearing with them for a while, again, it was a woman from this tribe, perhaps it was, no, I don't remember, it was the woman or someone else. Once, that was the case of the poison, which was where a Jewish woman was involved. This is a different incident. They had planned to throw a heavy stone on Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as he passed by the walls which belonged to the Jewish area. So a conspiracy was hatched, but Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was told by revelation that this is what has been conspired against you, so avoid this. And ultimately it was proved that, of course, it was true, but to the satisfaction of all, it was proved that what God had revealed was exactly what had happened. So they went to the extent of taking the life of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. At this, Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sent a deputation to them, who told the Jews of their crimes, enumerating them. You have done this, you have done that, you have done that. You have violated the covenant of Medina repeatedly, and so we suggest that you leave Medina in peace. And if you do that, you will be permitted to take away whatever you may. No, you will not be ill-treated in any manner of speaking. But leave Medina, that is the minimum we can do at this stage. At this, they not only refused to accept this term, but also sent a challenge to Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We will not leave Medina, vacate Medina, do whatever you can, whatever is in your power to do, would defy your will. At this, Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is known to have said, Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest. The Jews seem to have settled on a path of war. Ultimately, they were surrounded by the Muslims. Their castles and fortifications were surrounded by the Muslims. After some days, when the Muslims saw no signs of wilting on their part, Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam decided on felling their trees of the dead trees, some of them. So he told his companions to start felling the trees one after the other, but slowly. It was not meant that all the orchards will be destroyed. When the Jews saw this happening, they could not bear this torture, and they cried and wailed, and they said, "All right, stop it. We don't want our gardens to be destroyed, so we are ready to come to terms." They requested that we decide to leave Medina without fighting you anymore, but we request that we should be permitted to take all the property that we can carry. Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepted this. This was his second decision. He said, "All right, you can take whatever you may." It so happened that they demolished their houses completely, left them in ruins, and took whatever of the building material they could carry. Not only that, they also carried those children of the tribes of Aus and Khazraj, who had, according to the older traditions, given their sons to the Jews for their upkeep. In fact, it was more than upkeep. It was a tribe in the olden times in Medina that, out of respect for Judaism, or out of consideration for some good omen or some sort, they would give some of their children devote to the Jews. So they will look after them, they will upbring them, and they would most often than not convert them to Judaism. So after Islam, the same tribes repented this decision, and they did not want their children to remain under Jewish influences and to grow up as Jews. So they approached Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they said, "This is the time. Please permit us to hold our own children from going along with the Jews, and we have a genuine excuse for that. There is no injustice involved." Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam's sense of justice was so perfect, so absolute. He said, "No, under no excuse will I permit you that. Once you have given your children with your own volition and free will, you have given them, and they belong to them." So the Jews were even permitted to take along those children of Aus and Khazraj who had entirely become Muslims by that time. So this was the courtesy and sense of justice of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is so viciously being attacked by Wari. Then again, Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed one of their allies, Muhammad bin Muslima, who prior to the coming of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a known ally and friend of the Jews, of this particular tribe. So he was appointed to see to it that they are not in any way obstructed, and they are permitted to live freely in whatever fashion they want. So it is reported that they left in such pomp and power, as if a victorious army was marching out of the territory they had conquered and carrying everything along with them. So Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Muslims not to interfere at all with this process, and they were allowed to live in peace. These are the people who later on settled in this place, Khaybar, and we'll come to Khaybar later on. Deuteronomy, yeah, that's right. And I think I was right in translating istisna as Deuteronomy. So now we come to Banu Qurayza. According to Veri, most viciously and mercilessly 800 Jewish men were slaughtered by Hazrat. Let's read the story of Banu Qurayza, how it happened, what was the problem involved. Number one, let me tell you that the number was not 800. This is further exaggeration. Apart from other cruelty, he has also exaggerated the number involved. The number was half of it, that is 400, according to the authentic books. According to some scholars, it was not even that, because it has been calculated that the prisoners of war were kept in a place of which we know very well how big it was. We know the measurements. They have been recorded in history. And it is mentioned by some scholars that it is impossible to pack, even like sardines, 800 or 400 men in that small place. So anyway, we accept the verdict of history that there were 400 involved in this murder, as they call it, or punishment, as we come to learn later on. What happened was, this happened at the time of Battle of the Ditch. Even ordinarily, they were bound by the covenant to support Muslim war efforts against an enemy attacking Medina. Not only the Jews, but all others, idolaters, etc., were bound by this covenant. Instead of helping the Muslims at the time of the greatest crisis in the history of Islam, that is the Battle of the Ditch, the Jews decided to turn their coats and take sides with the attacking forces. And this was established beyond a shadow of doubt, that they were sending their messages, they were advising them where to attack, they were working as their spies. And when messages were sent by Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam, instead of rejecting these allegations, they accepted them and said, yes, we will continue to do it. They had decided, perhaps in their false estimation, that the time for the end of Islam had come and they will never be able to survive this crisis. So that was the time, they thought, to benefit to the maximum from this situation and to be on the sides of the attacking tribes. Now, when ultimately, as you know, the miracle of the attacking hosts suddenly deciding to run away, not deciding, but they're forced in a manner, you know perhaps already, but if some of you don't know, let me tell you a little bit about it, not in detail, of course. What happened was that the invading tribes of Arabia, which outnumbered the garrison of Medina by such odds that it was impossible for the Muslim minority surrounded by these invaders to survive for long. All supplies of food were cut. The people, the surrounded Muslims were much smaller in number, and they were completely exhausted by, among other things, by digging the ditch around Medina, which was a very, very difficult task. And it was a rocky, stony area, and there are so many stories or facts of history about how they went through this hardship in hunger and almost destitution, that even today when you read the account, one shudders with the thought of how much they must have suffered. At the same time, the hypocrites among the Muslims from Medina, they had started withdrawing from these efforts. And the Holy Quran speaks of them that they were so terrified that as if their eyeballs had turned backwards, like they turned backwards at the time of death, in the throes of final throes of death. Sometimes the eyeballs become white and they turn backwards. The Holy Quran describes this was the state of the weak among the Muslims, and the hypocrites, of course, were openly saying, "We are finished, we are no more. The time has come." And Medina was shaken like a great earthquake, according to the description of the Holy Quran. That was the time when this treachery was carried out by this tribe of Qaynuqa and Qurayza. Qaynuqa is the first one. So what happened that not morning, but in the later part of the night, a sudden storm started blowing, and that storm put some of the fires off. And because the Arab tribes, idolaters, were very superstitious, this omen was taken to be a very ill omen, that their fires had been extinguished. So some of them started moving stealthily, and they wanted to break camp and run away. As they did it, this was caught up by others who saw them, and gradually panic was built, and everybody thought that a great attack had taken place, and everybody was running. So they started running in panic, and sometimes even they forgot to unwind the strings of the ties of their mounts, and they tried to ride the mounts and run away without untying them. So this added further to further confusion, and it was such a mad panic which developed there, and mad rush, that seldom is seen in the history that such powerful army invading and surrounding such a small weak people should be in such a mad haste to leave and to run away. But God had done it, and God not only had done it, but had told the same night to Hazrat what was going to happen. So before anybody had any idea in Medina what was happening outside, Hazrat came out of his tent and asked somebody to go and find out what's happening outside. So then the news was revealed to him and to everybody that there is no army left at all. Just shattered camps and extinguished fires and this and that. So that was the victory from Allah, help from Allah, which saved Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his small number of companions from a vicious dual attack by the outsiders as well as the traitors from within. So imagine what should have been the fate of these people. By any standards, religious or non-religious, by any standards in the history of human warfare, how should such people be treated? Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam immediately after this great victory told the Muslims not to drop their weapons, remain armed and move on to the fortifications of this tribe, Banu Qurayza. So, without respite, although they were extremely tired for very long sleepless nights and all the hunger which I have already described, they were told by Ahmad not to take any risk, go straight on to surround the tribe, the fortifications of Qurayza. And so they did. After a while, Banu Qurayza realized that it was a lost battle. All their allies from the invading hosts had left. There was nobody to come to their help. So it was decided that something should be done about it. 3 choices were offered by the leader of the tribe to the people. One was to become Muslims, because he told them, after what I have seen, I have no choice but to believe that Islam is right. What we have seen is a sign from God. Nothing else, nothing shorter of that would have saved the Muslims. So my personal advice to you is to accept this choice. But the Jews were too proud to accept it. And particularly under the influence of their clergy, they said, no, this is out of question, rule it out. The name of their chief was Ka'b bin Asad. He offered the second choice. All right, if you're so proud, then I suggest that we slaughter our own women and children with our own hands, and then jump into the battlefield and kill to the last number, get killed to the last number. And this is the most honorable end that one can conceive a proud tribe like ours can meet. They refused. They said, it's impossible, we can't kill our own children. And if we kill our own children, then what is the fun of living and doing anything in life? So that was ruled out. In fact, he pointed out that if you're so proud, then do this. Otherwise, there is no sense in claiming to be proud and not giving in. The third choice was also rejected again, I think, under the influence of Jewish clergy. He said, all right, the third choice is, the only way we can think of any measure of success is to attack the Muslim camp tonight, because this is the night of Sabbath. And the Muslims know that on the night of Sabbath, the Jews never would never attack, because they even cease to follow the normal activities of life. They don't do anything, just the rest. So they said, this would be the biggest surprise we can launch upon them, and we can spring upon them, and that is the only way to hope for victory. This was refused, again by the Jewish clergy, I understand, although it's not mentioned in so many words in the history. And they said, look here, all our history is full of violation of the Sabbath. And we know that we have been punished throughout in the history by God repeatedly for these violations. So if we escape one enemy, how shall we escape the wrath of God, which must follow immediately? So they were caught in 2 fires, and they said, no, all right, we'll face the fire of the Muslims rather than the fire of wrath of Allah, while they forgot that on that side was also the wrath of Allah, which was awaiting them. So ultimately, it was suggested that we should invite someone who is weak in decision and also very friendly to us. We should suggest his name, and again, to impress him, we should stage a drama which would highlight our perils and our difficulties and problems in a manner that he would be influenced in our favor, then we'll send him back to request Ahmad to accept our surrender on our terms. So that is exactly what they did, and they chose one companion of the Holy Prophet ﷺ by the name of Abu Lubaba bin Munzar Ansari. He was a very devout Muslim, no doubt about it, but he was a very simple-minded person and also very friendly to the Jews. So when he visited them, as had already been decided, the Jewish women and children staged a drama by wailing, by crying, by exaggerating their problems and sufferings and showing we are destroyed, we have no food for children, no this and that and that. So the wailing impressed him so much that he said, all right, please stop it, tell me what I can do. They said, first of all, let us know exactly, if we surrender, what the Prophet Muhammad, is referred to him as Muhammad, would do. Now, to show his siding with the Jews, to show that he was more sympathetic to the Jews, instead of saying openly that Ahmad would murder you, could have you killed, he couldn't do that because on the one hand there was Islam, he did not want to compromise his faith, and on the other hand, the pity for this tribe, he said, waved with his hand, giving a sign as if they would be ordered to be killed by Ahmad. Now, this was a thing which turned against them, in fact, which forced them to take the worst decision of their history. They thought there was, like Mr. Very would have the world believe, and he himself apparently believes, that there is no mercy to be sought from Ahmad while there is mercy to be expected from his followers. So they sent a message that we are ready to negotiate peace, but an arbitrator should be appointed by mutual consent, and they suggested the name of Hazrat Saad bin Waqas, was it? Saad bin Maaz, the chief of Aus tribe, which was their historical ally of Banu Qurayza. And they thought, before becoming a Muslim, he had such long, deep, intimate relationship with our tribe that he would be the most likely person to show mercy and leniency to our tribe. So they suggested his name as arbitrator, and Ahmad accepted it. He said, yes, all right. If you would have his decision, that his decision would it be. So he was injured during the battle of the ditch. So he was carried to the place from the mosque where he was resting in his wounds. When he approached this tribe, he asked them clearly, would you accept my decision without any objection, in totality, with your own free will? They all said, yes, of course, we have suggested your name. What other course are we left with? So then, in all honesty and neutrality, he turned to his own tribe, Aus, and said, would you help me implement the decision? Would you agree with my decision? And they said, yes, of course. Now, he didn't turn to the Muslims in general. He turned particularly to his own tribe because it was a matter, he thought, which was not religious. This shows that his attitude was not permitted to be mingled with his religious sentiments, he had decided to be absolutely detached and decide on the merit of the case as the tribal customs were in those days. So they said they gave him full support. Then he turned to where Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was sitting with his companions, and it was perhaps impossible for him to name him and say, "Oh Muhammad, would you agree?" He said, man, the word used was man, who is sitting among them, this group, would you also agree? So Hazrat Sallallahu is, of course, go ahead. We'll fully agree with the word and letter and spirit of your decision. So then he heard both parties, assessed the crime, and gave the verdict that all the able-bodied men who can fight in battlefield must be slaughtered, must be beheaded in totality. The women and children should be saved, and they would be captured by the Muslims, and the property also would go to the Muslims, because according to the covenant, this was the most grievous, most unforgivable violation of the covenant, which according to their own book also should be punished even more severely. So this was the decision which verdict which he gave. Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam decided to remain close to the site of this execution by declaring that if there are special cases where exemption has to be given, then he should be approached. And this was a sign given to the all present that all is not yet lost. In his capacity of the final supreme authority, he still had that right to make some exceptions. So the Muslim friends of the Jewish people who were condemned to death approached them and requested them to come to terms with on this and that, so that they could request Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to save their lives. So many such instances are reported. In one case, a Jewish smaller leader was approached by a Muslim who said that I want to intercede on your behalf, but perhaps you do this and that, small minor things, conditions. And he said, yes, I could do that, but what is the fun in my living after if my children and my wife and my children are taken over by the Muslims? He said, all right, I will include this in my intercession, and I know Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would forgive and would permit you to keep your wife and children, etc. He said, what is the fun if I am left penniless, if all my property is also confiscated? He said, all right, I would include that also, and I know Prophet Muhammad, he would forgive you. He said, all right, what is the fun if the chiefs of my tribes are, like he named one or two, are not spared? And he said, but those two have already been executed. Nothing can be done about it. Because he said, all right, if they are executed, then I would be executed. I don't want to live after them. Other similar incidents took place to no avail, because one thing must be said about this tribe, that they were really brave people. Except for this treachery to which they succumbed at the end of the Jewish-Muslim relationship. They were the last tribe, you must remember. That means they had some decency among them, some good qualities as well, and they were at least brave people of principle. Only they erred when they thought everything is lost, the Muslims are to be destroyed ultimately, so why not benefit from this? Hazrat Aisha is reported, Hazrat Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, to be sitting by some ladies, Jewish ladies, and she reports that they were very brave. They would not show any signs of weakness, and they said, yes, go on and do whatever you want, because this is there is no choice, but this has to be done. So this tribe was eliminated ultimately under these circumstances. Now, looking at the history of all this, one thing emerges very clearly, that the only time when Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not trusted by the Jews, that was the time of their destruction. Every time the decision was left to Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he forgave and acted far more kindly than their own book would permit. This is the true picture of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how vicious is the attack of very, how totally merciless it is, but it offers us a wonderful illustration of the verse itself. He is the living symbol of what is described in this verse. Now, having read his vicious attack, now read this. وَإِذَا خَلَوْا عَضُّوا عَلَيْكُمُ الْأَنَامِنَ مِنَ الْغَيْظِ قُلْ مُوتُوا بِغَيْظِكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ بِذَاتِ الصُّدُورِ. This man seems to be dying with the raging fire within him against Islam and against Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So, despite the fact that there is no ground for this attack whatsoever, he shows whatever is within him. And he also becomes a living demonstration of the previous verse, which says, قد بدت البغضاء من أفواههم وما تخفي أكبر in the end وما تخفي صدورهم أكبر. Their hatred has become apparent from what they themselves publicly confess against you or proclaim against you, but what they hide within is far greater and far more vicious than you can imagine. So, in the writings of the Western Orientalists, many a time you come across such passages where they try to hide their viciousness and their hatred of Islam under polite, polished, civilized words. But the sting is obvious. One can never fail to notice the presence of the sting. But these are the rare moments when there is an outburst. A complete explosion is witnessed. And where is the example of what passes within their hearts? And he is a living example, I mean, he is a very correct demonstration of the truth of the Holy Quran's allegation that what they hide is far more explosive and obnoxious if you come to know of that. Now I'll turn to another aspect of Christian history. It is impossible for me to recapitulate the hatred and vengeance which the Christian world throughout the history has displayed against the Jews. It's impossible. It's a very, very long and extremely tragic story. Never in the history of relationship of any people in the world, and I repeat this, never in the history of relationship of any people in the world before, anywhere else, would you witness such persistent vengeance against a people as was witnessed by the 2000 years history of Jewish-Christian relationship. Repeatedly they mentioned that what the Jews have done to our Lord will never be forgiven, and will go on taking our revenge after revenge after revenge, and still that fire will not be appeased. So I'll take only a leaf out of that history to demonstrate to you where this vengefulness belongs. Not at the heart of Ahmad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who was Rahmatul Lil Alameen, who was a source of blessing for the whole mankind. But Mr. Very is describing his own inner state of mind and heart, and also unknowingly and inadvertently, he's attacking, in fact, the Christian attitude towards the Jews, not the Islamic attitude. Where are those? Yes. The Inquisition is generally related to Spain, the institution of Inquisition. This institution of Inquisition has been described by me during my sermons on the crisis of Baghdad and the Gulf War. But let me explain once again that the institution of Inquisition is not only limited to Spain. It was instituted at various times in history in almost all the European countries. France, in fact, is the country where it all began. It was taken over later on by Spain, and also this Inquisition institution, in some form or the other, existed in England, in Germany, in other places, and sometimes the results were so horrifying that even the popes who granted permission for Inquisition reacted against what was happening in the name of Christianity and protested against the cruelties committed against the so-called apostates or non-Jewish people, non-Christians, etc. But in Spain, particularly, the Jews were made target throughout. In other parts of Europe, it were not only Jews, but Christians, like those who did not agree with Catholicism, etc., or with any other brand of Christianity, they were at different stages of history punished variously by different rulers of the time. But in Spain, the Inquisition was particularly harsh and cruel against the Jews, not only the Jews who remained steadfast in their faith, but against the Jews who had got converted to Christianity. Similarly, they were extremely cruel against Muslims, not only those who remained Muslims and defied their pressures, but also those who had got converted to Christianity. So I leave 2 or 3 pages from this history, this unbelievable phase of history of Christian cruelty to the Jews. The Rise of the Spanish Inquisition by Jean Plaidy, page 106-107, published by Robert Hale, London. It reads, throughout Seville, it is pronounced in Spanish Sevilla. It originally is an Arabic name, so Sevilla is perhaps the right word, Sevilla or Sevilla. Throughout Sevilla, the riots started. Jews were robbed and murdered, their houses and synagogues put to the flames. The Jews were ordered to live in their own quarters, called juderias, apart from Christians. This they did. But Martinez was not satisfied. He wanted blood as well as humiliation. The juderias or ghettos were attacked. Juderias were the places where the Jews were kept, and a ghetto is now the common phrase known to apply to slum areas. So they lived in slums. Now it says the Juderias or ghettos were attacked, and in Sevilla alone 4,000 people were murdered. Other towns, hearing of the excitement and realizing the richness of the spoils which followed these murderous orgies, were smitten with equal fervor to destroy those who denied the divinity of Jesus Christ. The cry was, baptism or death, baptism or death. Now you may, it may sound familiar, this tone to you, because you have gone through the similar experiences in Pakistan at least, where the cry is that either you will be murdered or you must renegade and denounce Ahmadiyyat. So there was a time when this happened to the Jews at the hands of the Christians. The numbers of the slain mounted to 50,000. Imagine, in just one phase of frenzy, not in the entire history, during that particular period, 50,000 Jews were murdered shamelessly without any crime, only to coerce them to accept Christianity. As I have already said, the slogan was baptism or death. Now compare this with the history of Banu Qurayza. What happened to them and why it happened to them. And imagine the frame of mind of people like Mr. Very and other Orientalists who go on, playing with the inflated acts of cruelty of the Muslims and allegedly acts of cruelty of Muslims of 1400 years ago, by quoting and requoting and quoting about the number of 400 or 800 Jews being slaughtered. What they have been doing themselves, if you count them all together, according to my estimation, including the Nazi slaughter of the Jewish people, it's called Holocaust, I think the number must be around 1 crore or beyond that. Altogether in the Jewish history, Christian relationship, in historical relationship, they must have been, the Jews must have been murdered beyond the number of 10 million. And that is a very conservative estimate. It could be double as much. That is the reason why, being the oldest people belonging to the Semitic races and the oldest religion of the trio of Judaism, Christianity and Islam, they are so small in number today. In the entire world, they are only 15 million, including the 5 million Jews of America and 2.5 million Jews of Russia, all inclusive. Their number is only 15 million. So where have they gone? While we know that they have been multiplying at faster rate than the non-Jewish people during the known periods of their history where they cohabited with other people around. So it is on record that they multiply faster. And even today this is true. All the figures which I have come across of multiplication through reproduction, the Jewish people are perhaps the fastest growing people in the world through multiplication, through reproduction. And even in England, if you cover this area, you will be surprised that Jewish families in England are the largest families. And the same applies to the continent and to the Americans. I have come across sometimes some Jews during my journeys, travels, and when I ask the number of the children, I am really surprised and sometimes astounded. Some Jewish families I met during my trip to Holland had as many children as 12 or more. So they were sightseeing, and there was almost a ladder of children, of all sizes. So when I inquired, I was told that they belong to one single family. So despite this trait, which I do not condemn, of course, where have they gone? More than 4,000 some hundred years of history has left the Jewish number only to the extent of 15 million in the world. So that proves beyond the shadow of doubt that my estimate is most conservative. They have been repeatedly slaughtered and murdered by the Christians so much, so often, in so many different places of the world, that after all the journey of about 5,000 years, they left only with the meager number of 15 million people. And they blame all this on Islam and the hatred, na'uzubillah min zalik, God forbid, that Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam carried in his heart against the Jewish people. Now I read another page of Jewish-Christian relationship in history. They were not satisfied by just murdering them. They had some devilish sense of revenge, which surpasses the Jewish revenge against the Christians or others. Although they have been painting the Jews as the symbols of vengefulness, but when you read the history of Christian atrocities against the Jews, you are bound to believe that they excelled Jews in every department of revenge. So they put them to fire alive. They burned them on stakes and enjoyed the slow torture, and yet they were not satiated. Yet their thirst for revenge was not quenched. The same book which I have quoted reads, "The sight of those human bodies writhing in the flames, the sound of their groans, inspired the inquisitors to greater efforts. Instead, they fueled the fire of revenge. The fire which burnt slowly to death the Jews fueled the fire of the revenge of the inquisitors instead of quenching it. They wanted more burnings, more human sacrifices." Ojeda, or Ojeda it is written in English, was urging the people of Sevilla to provide him with heretics. If they did not produce them, they themselves would very soon come under suspicion, for heretics must there be. The chief inquisitor announced that all the converts from Judaism to Christianity are now under suspicion. They are more likely to be hypocrites than otherwise. So I show mercy to them and tell them to come forward and confess that they were cheating the Christian world, while within their hearts they still were Jews. So if they come forward of their own accord, then they will be forgiven, they will be shown mercy. If they did not, then they will fall under suspicion that they are hiding, and they would be proved to be criminals anyway. Because the slogan was, there have to be heretics. It's impossible for a society to be without heretics. So you point out or you become heretic. This was the choice offered to them. So what happened? At this time, however, The plague which had been raging through Spain came to Sevilla, and in the streets men, women and children who had been struck down were unable to reach their homes and lay dying. One of the first victims was Ojeda himself. This cruel perpetrator of Inquisition fell victim, was in fact almost the first victim of plague. He was dead within a few days. He had witnessed the first auto de fe, that is, I think there's a term in English for this, fire ordeal, it's called. Auto de fe, that to put on stake to fire and to put to test one's faith by torture on fire, and had planned many much more impressive to follow, but the first was his last. And with the plague came a respite for the Sevilla, for it was impossible to carry on the work of Inquisition in such a stricken city, and it became necessary for the Inquisitors to move out of the town. They set up their headquarters temporarily at the village of Arsena. Alas for Arsena! Because despite the calamity of plague, they went on searching for the hypocrites in Arsena and kept on burning them alive. But the plague ultimately left. To what respite or relief for the Jews? The same historian writes, the plague in Seville or Sevilla was replaced by a worse enemy. The Inquisition returned. Now a state of terror reigned in the town. It had been seen how useless it was to protest. There was the example of Diego de Susan, who had been one of the town's most powerful men. Auto de fe were now being held at the rate of about one a month, and the inquisitors were indefatigable in their search for victims. The dungeons of the convents were full, and no more could be kept there. Many were taken to the castle of Triana, close to the city. There were vast dungeons in the castle, but these too were very soon filled to their capacity. No content with burning the living, the inquisitors brought charges of heresy and apostasy against the dead. Not content with the burning of the living, the inquisitors brought charges of heresy and apostasy against the dead, whose bodies were dug up and publicly burned. This is the Jewish forgiveness, the Christian forgiveness. If one has a right to taunt back, then this is what we can say, all right. If Anzar's heart was devoid of mercy, then is this mercy according to the Christian definition? Victims were needed, so new edicts were issued. Once the known victims or alleged victims had been finished altogether, all those who were guilty of heresy or apostasy were urged to come forward and confess. A time limit was given for them to do this. If any failed to do so and were discovered in their sin, they were warned, meet with little mercy. 20,000 conversos came forward. Converts were called converso or conversos. 20,000 conversos came forward, trembling with terror, to admit that they had at times practiced Jewish rites. Despite having converted, they tremblingly said, all right, we confess. Occasionally, sometimes, we did go back to the old rite customs. Confession must be sincere, was the answer.
Confession must be sincere. Yes, was the answer to these poor people, and their sincerity could only be credited if they informed against those of their acquaintances who had been equally guilty. They said, all right, you have confessed, we know how to treat with you, but to show that you're sincere, you must divulge the names of those of your friends and relatives who have not come forward. And they have to be there. There must be some who are trying to hide themselves. So they were put to death mercilessly anyway. But before they died, under torture, they also implicated some other innocent Jews or converts who might have got converted very sincerely. So this is how they were ultimately wiped out, all the Jews and the converts alike. Now, as against this, the Islamic teaching, which has been referred to in that verse, which is under attack by Very, is explained by the Holy Quran itself. And there is no room whatsoever for misreading that verse by any scholar in the world. The Holy Quran declares it very clearly and unambiguously. لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين. Allah forbids you not respecting those who have not fought against you on account of your religion and who have not driven you out from your homes, that you be kind to them and deal equitably with them. Surely Allah loves those who are equitable. This is the true meaning. That verse was directed only against those who had initiated offense against Islam and cruelty to a degree that they were turned out of their homes and deprived of their properties and even attacked and killed just for the crime of holding a belief in one God. So the Holy Quran says that our advice to be careful about them, from them, to be wary and to be cautious, not to divulge your secrets. This is the only crime which, if it is a crime, which can be proved against Islam, that Islam teaches its followers to be wary against known criminals, known invaders, known perpetrators of crimes against you. The answer is only be wary, only be cautious. And Mr. Very takes very strong exception against this advice. While the Holy Quran declares, as far as the rest of the society is concerned, we do not forbid you from having good, benign, humanly relationship. We also admonish you to do that because you love Allah and you care for love of Allah, and we declare that Allah loves those who are kind to their fellow human beings and who are benign in their behavior to others. Again it declares, إِنَّمَا يَنْهَاكُمُ اللَّهُ عَنِ الَّذِينَ قَاتَلُوكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ وَأَخْرَجُوكُم مِّن دِيَارِكُمْ وَظَاهَرُوا عَلَىٰ إِخْرَاجِكُمْ أَن تَوَلَّوْهُمْ وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُمْ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Allah only forbids you respecting those who have fought against you on account of your religion and have driven you out of your homes and have helped others in driving you out, that you make friends with them. That is only the injunction. It's not that you kill and slaughter them and do whatever you may please with them. It says, don't be so friendly. Tawalla, the word it means, don't be so friendly to them as to have a feeling of belonging to them and not to play safe with them. That is the only advice. By any standards in the world, of any civilization, This could be the mildest response that could be suggested. No milder response can ever be envisaged. All right, next inshallah tomorrow. Now.
أعوذ بالله